Hey everybody, I think that we are live. This is Sean Vittora with the Lights Camera Pro podcast. I'm here today with Eric Carter-Landin, who is of the True Consequences podcast. It's a true crime podcast. How's it going, Eric?
It's going well. How are you today?
Man, I'm doing good. Thanks for doing this, man. This is really cool. You are one of the bigger podcasts that I've interviewed. I actually just put a post out on some of the message boards because I usually do actors, writers, and producers. And I said, hey, anybody interested in being interviewed as a podcaster? We want to know your secrets. We want to know how you did it, how you started, all that stuff. And we'll talk about that today. And here you are, but you've got a big podcast with merch and Patreon and listeners and all this stuff. So we're really interested to hear about it. How did you start the podcast? How did you come up with the idea? How long did it take you to launch? All that good stuff.
So for those of you who don't know my story, my brother was murdered when I was 6 years old. And the person who was responsible for his death was never charged, never prosecuted. And so that whole scenario has always been at the center of why I'm doing this.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of issues with justice in my state. And so I've always wanted to do something to honor my brother, to help other people in the same situation. And I've liked podcasts for probably like 10 years now. Listened to them before they even really got into their big heyday. And I've always been into weird stuff. I've always been into true crime and mysteries and paranormal and just all kinds of weird things because I just like to look at things that are unanswered, things that are not clear, because that stuff just fascinates me. So all of this kind of built up, my whole life to this point where it just hit me one day last year, probably around March or April, that I needed to do a podcast. And I knew right away what I wanted to do, and I knew what it was going to be about. And it took me a while to come up with a name. But from that point, I ended up launching in October. So about, I don't know how many months that is. 7 months or something to get it all going. Yeah.
And so your podcast, I was just talking to you before we went live, your podcast is very produced and it's like a story and you have music and it's not, mine is just an intro and an outro and a conversation and interview. So yours is much more complex. It's almost like doing a segment on a TV show. And so I guess a lot of the questions are, how do you do it? How do you prepare for it? What's the research? And how long does it take you to put together an episode? For example, I just listened to the Jeffrey Epstein episode, which is really creepy. But, how do you put together one of those episodes?
So the process is, I've planned it all out. I'm a compulsive planner.
Okay.
I I have spreadsheets for everything. My life is very planned out, and that's almost like neuroses, I guess. But
right.
But it works really well for creating a show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So prior to even having a name or anything, I started listing out potential stories that I wanted to look at and things I wanted to talk about. And so I came up with about 5 seasons worth of episodes planned out, ready to go. So I have that list that I work off of, and I start researching. So there's a lot of different ways to research these cases. The internet is my best friend.
Yes.
With that, I use a bunch of different sources. I like to get a variety of sources so that I can try to figure out what is consistent, what seems to be the most truthful parts of these stories, and I try to be as accurate as possible. So I'll watch documentaries, I'll read articles, I'll read court records, I'll take notes the whole time, and then from that point I start to write. And I'll write out basically the bones of the story so that I have a guideline, because otherwise I can ramble.
Yeah.
and I don't want to do that. I want to keep people's attention and focus on what's important. So I'll write out my story and then record typically,
Okay.
and from there go into editing and post production. All of this takes I'd say it's a good 20 hours per episode that goes
Wow.
into it. Yeah,
With
maybe
with
more.
editing and post and publishing and
And
all that. Yeah.
research and all of that. Yeah.
Okay. And who is your provider? Is it Libsyn?
It used to be Libsyn. I just switched to Spreaker actually.
Okay. And why did you
Because
do that? Can you say?
yeah, so Spreaker was willing to offer me advertisements at my level.
Okay.
Libsyn really limits that to the giant shows. And so it would have taken me probably a few more years with Libsyn to be able to have that feature activated. And with Spreaker, it was instant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can we talk numbers? How many people are listening to your podcast?
So I'm averaging about 1,500 downloads per episode.
Okay.
Over the last 8 months, I just hit 43,000 downloads
Wow. Congrats.
this week. Yeah. Yeah. So that's overall, that's total over 29 episodes. And it's growing. It continues to grow every month. Last month I had about 8,000 downloads just last month. So that is kind of exponentially getting larger and larger.
Very cool. And as far as I just lost my train of thought. As far as Patreon, you use Patreon, right? What do
Yeah.
you do with that? Because some people use it, some people don't. It works for some people. It kind of probably works for you because you got a lot of listeners.
Yeah, so initially I created it as a means to help offset some of these costs because I'm self-funding all of this. The equipment, everything is coming out of my own pocket, and I was majorly in the red for a while now. I still am, just not as much as I was. And so I wanted to create something to give my listeners the opportunity to interact with me, and also to contribute to the show to help continue, allowing me to continue producing it. So what I do with that is I provide, if at any level you're going to get a sticker and a handwritten note from me as a thank you for my patrons. And then depending on the tier, you get different things. Like some tiers will get early access, ad-free episodes. Some will get access to some of my research documents that I'll release to them so they can look deeper into the cases if they want to. And I'm looking at adding more benefits for my patrons. One of them I'm thinking of doing is having patron-only episodes, but that's going to take some additional time, so I've got to figure out how that's going to happen. But that's kind of the route I'm going with. Is I really appreciate my patrons. They're all so loyal and such generous people, and I'm very, very grateful for them. This show wouldn't probably have been able to survive without them.
Wow, that's very cool, man.
Yeah.
And so right off the bat, the first episode, are you putting ads? Are you doing promo swaps, anything like that, or does it take a while?
So the first episode I released with 3 episodes.
Yeah.
My first season, and I did that intentionally because I wanted to give people a chance to get a feel for what the show was going to be like. Unfortunately, I wasn't very skilled with audio quality and with those things. So in the beginning, it's really rough, and the quality was rough, and I got kind of hammered for it a little bit, but I took that feedback and used it to make it better. And I feel like I've gotten to the point where I'm comfortable with it, and the sound is I think it's pretty good. I'm sure there's always room. Thank you. I'm sure there's always room for improvement. But I didn't get ads in terms of like monetization right away. Like I said, Libsyn wasn't willing to do that for me. Some of the things that I did to drive my audience, though, so it's really unique for my show is that it's focused on a specific area of the country. It's focused on my state, on New Mexico.
Right.
And so that creates some opportunity that maybe some of these shows that cover a broader genre of true crime don't have. they don't have access to these types of things that I do. And so I took advantage of it. So I started sending press releases to the local media, to every news outlet in the state as soon as I launched my show. And with every episode, I would send a new press release. And that caused a couple of news channels to pick me up in November. So a month later, and I was interviewed, and then my listenership just jumped. And because it's so hyper local, it was appealing to people, and it was a perfect way to get the word out there, because these are local people who care about local issues, and they get to hear about my show, and it was free. So that was awesome. So that helped a lot. And then I do some social media advertising to drive some more people to my page, and I target that based on their interests and based on them living in New Mexico.
Right. And when you say social media advertising, do you mean Facebook ads, Google ads? What are you doing?
Facebook primarily. Yeah. Some Instagram, but mostly Facebook.
Facebook just has an incredible reach. Like the difference between Facebook and YouTube with stuff like this. And so, oh God, I have so many questions. I could talk to you all day. But as far as the Oracle network that you're doing, what happened there? How did that come about? You're on a specific network, and are you exclusive to that network?
Yeah. So the network was created by a group of podcasters that I've been connected to through social media. I consider them friends now. There's a lot of podcasters that I consider to be friends. And this group of podcasters really wanted to create the opportunity for all of us independent podcasters to lift each other up together. And so it's kind of a network, but it's not really a network in the sense that the monetization and everything with my show belongs to me.
Okay.
But the benefit of it is we all cross promote each other's shows. So we'll do promo swaps, on each other's shows. We will have a featured podcast every month, and it's everybody's responsibility to tweet their episodes, to talk about that show, to put it on Facebook, all those things. That's kind of your commitment joining this network. And we all just kind of help each other succeed through lifting each other up. And it's a really awesome thing. It doesn't cost anything, and there's a lot of benefit for everybody involved.
And is that for true crime people only, or is that all podcasts?
So there's a vetting process. The people that are considered to be, quote, leadership on the network will vet and review. They're a little bit picky about who they want on the network. They don't want, somebody who's going to be inflammatory or somebody who is going to hurt everybody else's reputation by being on the network. And then the quality of the show is pretty important as well. But we have a comic like a Marvel Comics, DC Comics based podcast on the network. There's mostly true crime, but that's because a lot of the people who are, in charge of creating that network were true crime podcasters and are true crime podcasters, and that's who they know. But we're getting more and more diverse shows added as well. So
cool. Can you tell me about some of your favorite episodes that you've worked on and why?
Yeah. I love the interviews with victims' families. Those episodes are so personal and so important. I feel really proud of those because I get to give these family members of murder victims the opportunity to tell their story in their words, on their terms, and in as much time as they need. I really try to steer away from creating some kind of slant or editorializing the story, because there's so much power in somebody who's lost somebody being able to tell the story of who that person was and what happened, and especially the cases where they haven't received justice. I feel really good about being able to offer that as an opportunity for these people. And unfortunately, in season 2, I haven't been able to do that because of coronavirus and everything.
Right.
I had a bunch of interviews lined up, and then it just kind of all it all kind of went away. But so there are a few of those episodes that I really am proud of, and I would consider my favorites. The first one would be the interview with Cynthia Vigil Jaramillo, who was a victim of the Toy Box Killer. It was an early episode, but it was powerful, and it was she's just such an incredible person. She's just so inspiring. What she survived, I just can't even wrap my mind around it. There's an interview I did with the mom of one boy and his best friend who were murdered. She's actually on the way to get justice now. The people have been arrested. Her name was Amanda Kimbrell Romero. So there's just a bunch of these personal family stories that I just love them so much.
Right. And I listened to the Jeffrey Epstein episode, and a lot of it's graphic content. So obviously for just an audio podcast, you're just putting explicit, but do you post it anywhere else that you have to put ratings or stuff like that because it is such a touchy subject?
Everywhere that I distribute to, including YouTube, has explicit disclaimers on it just because I have a bad habit of cussing.
Yeah.
And then
Me too.
the content and the content itself can be troublesome for people, especially when you're talking about things like child abuse and murder and all of this stuff. Not everybody can handle that.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. So on a lighter note, two things. Like, how did you start to integrate your ads into your podcast or your promo swaps and stuff like that? And then talk a little bit about your merch and how you created that. Is it just a site that you go to, or was there a process for that?
Yeah. So the ads that came from Spreaker, those are all automated. I just select where I want them to be inserted, and they put them in there. I'm also working with a company called...
Sorry to interrupt. What do you mean they're just inserted? Like, are they just inserted at the beginning automatically with the, I forget what it's called, dynamic ad insertion?
Yeah. So on Spreaker's dashboard, for every episode you upload, you can mark where you want ads to be put in, and then they just put them in for you automatically. And I really don't have any control over what ads are playing. I can just only control when they play.
Okay, so it's just like a little marker, and you're editing within Spreaker? You're not editing within... Okay.
No, I use Audacity.
Okay.
And that's where I edit. But when I've uploaded the final product to Spreaker, that's when it lets me go in and put the placeholders for the ads. Okay,
it's like a little marker in the audio file in Spreaker that you've uploaded. Okay. I was wondering...
Click on the time slot that I want the ad to go in. It goes there.
Cool. So let's go back to that before we get to merch. What is your process? So you're recording in your house. Do you usually have a guest come in with you? Do you record remotely? And just tell us about your equipment. And then we already know Audacity, but just your process.
And then I also will talk about promo swaps and stuff like that.
Sure.
And
sure.
all of other ad things that I do. But so for my process, it depends on what's going on. So with my state being on lockdown and everything that was happening, I was doing more remote interviews and more remote conversations. And so I've used Skype. That's been pretty good. I used Zoom, which wasn't very good. The audio quality from Zoom is just horrible.
Right.
And so I finally settled on an app called Zencastr.
Okay.
And it allows you to record remotely with as many people as you want, and then it combines all of the audio, and it's really clear audio for downloading. So that's what I've liked to use the most.
And does Zencastr cost a monthly fee?
So it does, but right now they're offering it for free because of everything that's going on.
Okay.
So I've been using it for free, but I'll probably pay for it whenever it comes time to do that because it's really good.
Have you heard of Clean Feed? I use Clean Feed for my audio remotes.
I haven't, but I'll check it out.
Yeah, you can just look at it. It's really clear. We're on Skype right now,
Yeah.
And this is Ecamm Live, the software that we're broadcasting, because there's a whole process with YouTube and Facebook with these like streaming services, and it's really a pain. But this is much easier. It does glitch a little bit. I've had people. I was talking to someone in England, and it just stopped and glitched and came back. She had to call back, and it freezes every once in a while. You haven't frozen yet. I haven't, but that happens. But Clean Feed is crystal clear. And the audio, I think, is ISDN quality. It's a higher quality than the MP3. And it works great. I love it.
Yeah.
So, sorry, continue on what you were
That's
talking
okay.
about.
But I do have a couple of microphones here that I use for when people can come into my studio and record with me. And I've done that with a couple of my friends that are guests on my show sometimes. You wanted to know about equipment?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I want to know personally,
Sure.
but the people who are listening, there's a lot of podcasters listening.
So I have a very fancy microphone. It's the Shure SM7B.
Yes.
It's pretty popular with podcasters. It's very expensive, but it was a worthwhile investment for me because in the beginning, I was using a Zoom H2N recorder, and the quality on that was mixed. And the problem was that it doesn't pick up everybody's voices very well at the same time. So somebody would inevitably end up sounding really far away and really quiet, even if you were right in front of the microphone. So I sold that. I bought this, and I also bought a ATR 2100, which is a lot less expensive. It's about $99 versus this one, which is like $400. They're both really good microphones. I prefer this one, but for my guests, you can't really tell the difference.
Right.
I can tell the difference, but I think I've just, maybe that's in my head. I don't know.
Yeah.
I also have a two channel interface. So these microphones plug in with an XLR cable to the interface, and the interface feeds into my computer.
Is it Scarlett or is it Behringer?
It's a Scarlett 2i2. Yeah.
Okay. I have a Behringer, which works great.
Yeah.
And then the promo swapping and the ads, how did that come about? Was that Oracle or something else?
No, social media is just incredible. So I didn't even know promo swaps were a thing until one of my podcaster friends, she posted it on Twitter. She's like, "Hey, I want to swap promos with people." And I'm like, "I don't even know what a promo is, but I'll do it. Sign me up, whatever." So I started like trying to hear what other people's promos were, and I recorded one. I probably need to re-record it because I don't really like the one that I have now. But then I started posting that on Twitter and on other places, and getting people to send me their promos. I send them mine. It doesn't cost anything. And I've had a promo on the beginning of every single episode of season 2 for other shows. And my show's been on their shows as well. And it's really an awesome free way to drive additional listens. It doesn't necessarily send droves and droves of people. It's more like a slow trickle, but that eventually builds up if you get enough momentum going into more and more listeners. So,
right. I feel like podcasting is like this giant rock at the top of the hill, and it just keeps rolling, and or even a snowball that gets bigger and bigger. Like the more episodes you add. So I had one podcast a week, and then I doubled to 2 a week, and my numbers double. I mean, mathematically it makes sense, but it just seems like it's building and building, and then some people are going back and listening to the older podcasts, and this video thing is out of control. I mean, the reach of this live video, I love it, and I kind of like it better. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I know yours is like a produced, almost like a little TV segment for like Frontline or something. But is that bad? Did I insult you?
It's fine. It's just I don't think of myself like that, so it's just interesting to hear somebody else's perception.
It is. It's so much more in depth. It's like a feature on a news show like Dateline. But I just feel like the podcasting thing grows and grows and grows.
Yeah.
but I do prefer this because I can see you and I
Yeah.
can see your reactions and I can talk to you. And there is something very cool about having someone in your head, right?
Yeah.
When you're talking to a guest, especially, or if you're just out there talking to people, it's just you're really, really focused.
Yeah.
Like now, I'm looking down at my phone, and you're looking at your equipment, but this is very cool. It's very different, but it's very cool.
Yeah.
I love the
It's
live
it's
thing.
it's the most intimate thing, I mean, that you can do aside from being in a like physical relationship with somebody is being in their ears. And I take that pretty seriously. You know, um, I try to be authentic, and I try to be honest, and I try to do things the right way, because I know that, you know, I have people's attention, so I have to be careful what I say.
Right. And I do think that is across the board what I've heard from podcasters and just people in general is authenticity. Is that as soon as you're like, oh, I want to sell you something, that I can't stand the big podcasts like Bill Simmons and Joe Rogan. It's like 5-6 minutes of ads before they start. I'm like, dude, I'm leaving. Like this is too
Yeah,
long.
yeah,
Like I'm hitting that 30-second button like while I'm in the elevator going to walk the dog and I'm like, come on, man, let's start this thing. So many ads. Okay, so we covered a lot of stuff. Is there anything else you want to talk about with your podcast that we haven't asked, or before we get to advice?
yeah. So I was going to talk about. I'm trying to remember what it was that I was going to talk about.
Merchandise, maybe?
Oh yeah, we were going to do merchandise.
Okay.
So merch. Yeah, I created the merch. I wasn't sure that anybody would really be interested in merch. And it's kind of grown and developed. I, I don't know if I'm completely excited about who I'm using and who I'm partnering with right now, and I'm trying to source some local um, merchandise producers,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that would probably go over a lot better than some, you know, international website. But initially, I signed up with a company called TeePublic, and they're probably going to be mad at me for saying that the way that I did. But I just really believe in local business,
Yeah.
and I think it's important to support the local community, especially because the local community is who is propping this show up and making it what it is. Um, so I partnered with TeePublic for my T-shirts, my um, cups, mugs, magnets, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a few different designs. I have this one, which is the logo of the show.
I
I
really
have,
like the logo, man. How did you come up with that?
so the Zia symbol is the state symbol for New Mexico.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, so it wasn't like super inventive or anything, but it speaks to New Mexicans. They know what it is immediately, and it says to them that this is a New Mexican show. And so that's what I wanted. I wanted them to know immediately that this is a local person talking about local issues. So I designed this myself. And then I have a couple of other designs. I have one for my brother, Justice for Jacob design, that for every item that's sold, 50% of the proceeds go to the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And then I have a couple of other funny ones, like things that have come up in the show. I try to think about things that are relevant to what's happening in my show. And but I don't have very many designs. I have like 5. And it sells okay. It's not like I'm making millions of dollars. I mean, I'm making like maybe $10 a month on it. But
Right.
it's you know, I think the value of it isn't so much in the money that's coming in, because I don't really care about that. It's not about the money for me. This whole thing is about producing a show that is impactful and that's making a difference in the community that I live in. And the value in merchandise is when people buy it and wear it in the community, and then people start to see my brand out there. I think that that's where the value of my merch is, because I'm certainly not making any money off of it.
Right. And do you think, like, let me understand, like you were talking about something where you had a podcast and then someone was arrested. Were they arrested because of the podcast and the information getting out there, or did it just so
Oh,
happen?
no, it was coincidence.
It was coincidence. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, not coincidence. The investigation was already happening before I interviewed Amanda.
Okay.
And so I think it was because it was moving forward that I reached out to her to see if she wanted to talk about what happened. And so, you know, so far nobody's been arrested as a result of the show, but I think that, you know, maybe in the future there might be some progress on some cases that got some publicity. We'll see.
Right, and that's very cool, man. And then
Yeah.
if that happens, and then let me understand, because the show's about New Mexico crimes, but there was
Yeah.
a Jeffrey Epstein episode. So are you branching out to national stuff, or did he do some things in New Mexico?
He had a multi-million-dollar, 80,000 square foot mansion in New Mexico where he trafficked young girls to.
Okay.
Him and his accomplices, as well as some high-profile people. So I really try to stay true to, if it has any kind of connection to New Mexico, then I'll talk about it. If it doesn't, then, you know, I try not to.
Right. All right, man, this has been so cool and interesting. I just want to ask you advice for new podcasters. We have new podcasters every day, people who want to get into true crime. What is your advice for them? It's a long road, but stick with it. What do you want to say to them?
Yeah, this is going to sound probably pretty cheesy, but
No.
but I really do think that you have to stick it out. It's not going to be easy in the beginning, and you're going to feel like you're talking to yourself. And you might get some feedback. You know, my advice is to use that feedback in a positive way to improve your show. Try to not take it personally. Try to take it as the opportunity for you to improve things, because nobody comes out of the gate being 100% on top of everything, especially if you've never done it before. It's impossible to know all of the nuances that go along with this. And I'm still learning. You know, I have a lot to learn, and I'm probably going to continue changing and growing and all those other things. But sticking to it is so important, because eventually you'll find that there are people that, you know, that want to hear what you have to say. And that might be a big audience, it might be a small audience, but you'll find your people will find you, and they'll champion you, and they'll help lift you up. And that's what keeps me going, you know, seeing the reaction that, you know, that I've gotten in the community, and the embrace that I've gotten from the community has been incredible. And I can't thank New Mexico and its people enough for embracing me and welcoming me as a voice to tell these stories.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest thing is don't give up. The other thing is talk to other podcasters. You know, find those people that you admire, that you think are doing a great job. And, you know, I've reached out to people that I never thought would even give me the time of day to talk to me. And they have, and they've given me advice, and they've helped me. You know, I had one podcaster, she's the host of True Crime Fan Club. She gave me very specific advice. She listened to some of my episodes. She said, you know what, your content's good, but your audio quality needs to be improved, and here's exactly what you can do to make that happen. And that was the best advice I'd ever gotten, because it was very specific. It was something I could work on, and she's a big name out there.
Right.
You know, Lainey Hobbs is well known. She's the creator of the True Crime Podcast Festival. She's a big name out there. And so I reached out to her, and I didn't think she would write me back, and she did. I reached out to Sarah Turney, who is huge. She's trying to get justice for her sister, Alyssa. And I just said, hey, you know what? You've really inspired me to tell my brother's story, because I didn't want to do it before. And then I heard your show, and you made me want to do it. And I consider her a friend now. We talk pretty consistently, you know, so I would just say, reach out to those people, talk to them. We're all just people. We're all just trying to make this happen, and everybody has their own motivations, but that community is really important, and it'll help you, you know, because you're going to have bad days podcasting. You're going to have great days. You need to find people that are going to celebrate with you, and also help lift you up whenever you get knocked down a little bit.
Awesome. Awesome, man. Great advice. I just have one more question before we go, and that is the True Crime Festival you were talking about. Is like a conference with classes
Yeah.
and speakers and stuff like that? My question to you is, would you go to just a general festival or to see all different kinds of podcasters, or are you just focused on true crime because of your podcast?
Well, no, I would go to anything, honestly. Like I'm willing to do anything to get more exposure for the show. I also have another show that's in development. It's going to launch in 2 weeks. It's about paranormal in New Mexico, and so I'm excited about that.
Cool. What's it called?
It's called Dos Pequeños.
Ah. Translated to very spooky.
Well, so it's not even really a real word. So dos is two,
Yeah.
and then people in Albuquerque call themselves burqueños, or it's like a weird little slang name that we call ourselves. So we're spookeños. We're spooky burqueños.
Okay. Okay. Nice.
It's a made-up word.
Very cool. Well, my dream is to have there's lots of podcast conferences all over the country, but there's not one in Atlanta, and I'm in Atlanta, and I'd like to start with a small conference with some speakers. Maybe I'll ask you to speak someday. It's going to be once this COVID thing is over, once we have a vaccine, but I'd like to do that. And I know Podcast Movement, which you've probably heard of, they did like a Kickstarter to start their conference, but that's what I want to do. I want to have a conference, have people speak, and have classes, and people hang out together. An extension of this, so I could probably meet you someday.
Sign me up for that. I'm on board. I'll do anything.
Awesome, man. Well, Eric, this has been great. You're an awesome guy. I love the podcast. I'm going to listen some more. Is there any website or address that you want people to go to listen to the podcast?
Yeah, the podcast is available wherever you get podcasts. So you can find me on Apple, you can find me on Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, everything that you can think of, I'm probably there. And if you can't find me there, you can go to trueconsequences.com. All my episodes are there, all my case files and notes are there, and links to my merch and all of that. But yeah, you can also find me on social media. So.
Cool, man. Everybody check him out. Very cool podcast. And thanks so much, Eric. You have a great night. Thanks for doing this, man.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, man. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Bye.